framing as to what we think the world that opposition would want looks like and what we think status quo looks like and why we think it is a better alternative. And then I'm going to give you an argument on value of life. And then from my second speaker, you're going to hear on elitism and quality of life. So onto my framing. Firstly, what do we think life is? We think what life in itself matters, particularly because of the presence of death. We think we value what you do within your life. We value how you live your life because you know at some point it's going to come to an end. We think something that's particularly important within this debate is that, like within the motion slide, it explicitly mentions that this is when we're intervening with death as like something that is natural. We don't think this applies to people who are like in extreme accidents, in children who are about to die prematurely and things of that nature. And furthermore, we think that like existing medical systems already cater for these things. What we think we're fighting against, or what we think we're regretting, is a world where you, as an old person in your 70s and 80s, are on your deathbed and you think that, no, I don't really want to die yet, and I'm going to find like any means possible to make sure that doesn't happen. We think that's what we don't want. And why do we think we regret this? We think we regret something at a point in time where it undermines the most vulnerable and breaks down societal structures, and we think within our case we're going to show you why we think that this system does exactly that. Secondly, we think we also need to look at, again, emphasizing the fact that this is something that we're intervening with natural processes. We're not intervening with someone who's been in an accident and we refuse to put them in life support. We think it looks like individuals who simply decide that, oh, when their time has come, they simply don't want to be the way that is. And thirdly, we think something that's very important to note within this debate is the idea of access. We think that at a point in time we're fine, we take this and there's going to be issues of accessibility that side opposition is going to have to address. Why? Because we think that already existing systems of this thing such as life support are already expensive. And at a point in time where this is something that is equitable and available to everyone, as this pertains to something so as crucial as human life, we think there'd be issues of accessibility. We think life support is already $12,000 a day, and it's not something most people can afford. So they need to show us, even within their best case, why this is something that would be so beneficial for everyone and not the elites, as we'll go on within this debate. But fine, onto my arguments. Firstly, on the idea of like value of life. What do we have under this? Three things. Firstly, we think that enjoyment of life stems from mortality. We think the reason why you put like your effort into the things you love, the reason why you put so much effort into getting a particular grade, into being a particular person, and the reason you enjoy these things is because you know they won't be there forever. We think anything in excess becomes too much and is something that people will eventually hate, and we think the same thing applies to human life in and of itself. We think this is something that cannot be like, side opposition cannot come and tell us it's something that will be enjoyed, and if it is, we think it's going to eventually come at the expense of other people, something that again will be explained on the idea of like elitism, right? Secondly, this idea of like the destruction of things that humans have intrinsically valued and look forward to because of mortality in and of itself. We think this looks like finding someone to settle down with, having a family. We think people look forward to these things. Why? Because they know that at some point they'll never have this opportunity. At some point they'll never be able to like love someone. At some point they'll never be able to see another human being grow and nurture them in this particular way. We think at a point in time where we buy into side opposition and we live in a world where you can continue these things, and humans are less likely to value these things as much because it can be done at any point in time, and there are other things that they'll value more than this, right? And we think that when we break down societal structures, we opt for a dysfunctional world, and that's something we really don't want on our side of the house. And thirdly, we think that we value each other as individuals, as people, particularly because we know that the next person will not be around forever. We think I'm so nice to the individuals around me. Why? Because I know that they won't be there forever. I want to get value from my experiences with them, and I want to cherish what they bring into my life. We think at a point in time where you know that, hey, I can be mean to this person, I can do whatever I want or say to this particular person, and they'll always be around, and like we don't particularly value the experiences we have with each other. It's something weird, like it's a society which would be unpleasant to live in, even if they prove to us that immortality is such an amazing thing. We think we break down the very aspect of human connection and why we value it so much. The reason you love your best friend the way you do, the reason you love your siblings, your family, and the people around you the way you do, because you know they won't always be there forever, and you want to cherish the little time you have with them. We think a point in time where they have a society where individuals can simply decide that they don't want to die and can simply decide that they want to like take away from nature's natural course and go on with these things. We think we break down these very barriers of things that make life enjoyment. And as we've told you, we think life isn't just living and breathing. It's about experiencing these things. This is what makes us look forward to growing up, look forward to getting certain milestones because of the things we enjoy when we get to this point. And we think that if side opposition doesn't prove to us why this isn't something that's important or why it's something that's still there on their side of the house, they lose this debate. Proud.
to the matter that they already give us, but I'll then give a bit of recharacterization on what this medicalization actively looks like, but I'll give them two arguments. Firstly, on the idea of the choice that it uniquely gives, but also on the idea of how, like, we also give you the eradication of immortality and the circumstances that actively surround it. And lastly, I'll just give a bit of weighing and how we already did this debate. First then, in terms of responses, I think there are three main themes that come from side proposition. The first being about the value of life being attached to how finite it is. They say this is the reason because they think, like, the attainment of attachments and anything like that are only important because they actively end. We think that everything, things like attachments or things like activities, are all things that have inherent benefits in and of themselves. I don't get together with an individual, or I don't seek a relationship with my family and relatives just because they might leave, but because I genuinely love interacting with them and have fun interacting with them. We think the unique difference between these two things is that on their side of the house, you will not interact with them for a longer period of time. In fact, you will be separated by the curse and the disease that is death, and that's what we choose to actively be proud of actively solving, allowing you the distinct, like, choice to be able to have a much longer period of time with those individuals. The second thing here is that we think it's also the idea that they bring, the second thing here is the idea of access, and they say that it's very expensive. I think we note three levels of responses to this. The first response is to say that we think medicine has always inherently become much more cheaper over time. I think we see this with things like the inception of things like penicillin when it actively came in the beginning, becoming inaccessible to a lot of people, but everyone being able to get things like ARVs, being able to get things like penicillin right now. We think that level of accessibility comes with individuals actively being able to invest into those things, and we think that level of mass investment only comes with the ideas of medicalization, of mortality in and of itself. They are unable to get all those things on their side of the house. But not what happens comparatively. Because what we think happens on their side isn't that individuals aren't going to invest in this as a regret motion. We think what it actively looks like is probably that state isn't going to be the one to actively invest into this, but private corporations actively will. But what this uniquely does is that it gives the unique opportunity for only private corporations to be the one that have the exclusive right to actively have this level of technology, and that already creates a bigger inequality than the structures that they say they already aren't proud of on their side of the house. I think we already deal with all of their matter, and they're already losing this debate. What do we then give you in terms of characterization? Three things here. First, in terms of medicalization, we tell you that, like, we think it's a meaningful extension of the life for most individuals, but the fact that the mentality that death is terrible and death is a disease. But the last thing here is to understand that death has always been medicalized. We've seen this with the massive research that has happened with HIV, or the massive research that has happened with bacteria being able to get penicillin, being able to get chemotherapy, and how that has contributed to the comfortability of individuals even when they have these illnesses. What we say then in terms of argumentation is two things. First, on choice. We think from its inception, humans were born without choice. This is either through the things like the lottery of birth, but because also they just didn't choose to be born. But secondly, that in most instances they die without it too, because they live before they can see the smile of their grandkids one more time, before they can hold the hands of their partners one more time and say goodbye. Uniquely, we restore that choice on opposition. And the critical point here is that we understand that some people might die of unnatural causes, but we think that firstly, we create the incentive to actively remedy that. The incentive comes from trying to make a return on that investment. But the second thing here is that we think the choice in and of itself to extend life is meaningful, even if there are other things that might actively, like, cause some level of distraction to it. So even if I might die from, like, cancer or something like that, it doesn't mean that I'll actively stop taking, like, other pills for other illnesses because I might die from another illness. The third thing here is that, like, we think even if not everyone actively accesses it, the restoration of that choice to those who do is actively meaningful. But the last thing is that death uniquely robs you of that choice, and we're the only individuals that are able to extend it. The proof of outcome here is that people inherently want to live. Given the choice, most people would extend their lives. Only on opposition can you reasonably make that level of choice. And the proof of principle here is that the goal of the medical industry was always to make death a choice. Medicine exists to extend human lives, and we're the only individuals that are principally able to do this. The second argument here, I'll run like just the first part of it, and it will be extended by my second speaker, but it's the eradication of mortality and its circumstances. We think that at a point, death is a disease that individuals actively want to meaningfully avoid, and a few key things actively happen. First, is that there's indefinite research that actively occurs when individuals live a longer life, and that comes with the value of being able to get much more return on the amount of investment that comes into this because you get more information. We are proud to make a much better life for these individuals.
If my mom turns 80, so something I really want is for her to continue being alive. I want to be able to see her every day. But the problem is, my family is not particularly rich, and this is something they cannot afford. Tino Tunga probably also loves her mom, and she is able to keep her mom because they afford the machine for $25,000 per day. We don't think it is fair that only the elite people get to enjoy this benefit, whilst the poor continuously lose their relatives and experience pain just because of their incapability to pay this much money. Proud to oppose. Two things that I'm going to do for you. First of all, I'm going to respond to the flawed case that we get from Tino, right? And also reconstruction on our meta that he tries to destroy, attempts to destroy. And then I'm going to talk about the quality of life overall and this whole elitist mindset that then comes with this whole idea overall. So Tino comes here to tell us that the reason why he values a family member so much is particularly because he likes interaction with them and he wants to be with them. But we think then he ignores the framing that comes from Wadiwa, where she comes to tell you that when we talk about natural death, right, we're talking about things that happen at old age, right, things that are bound to happen at a point in time you get to a certain age, right. We think he then ignores that framing, right. With something that is then important then to consider is the fact that the only reason why you continue to visit your grandmother at a very old age is because of the probability of dying soon, right? We think that this is something you ought to understand. But then secondly, he also tells us how these people can get funded and access is something that people will eventually have, right? We don't understand how people are going to be able to buy machines that resuscitate people. At a point in time, hospitals in Zimbabwe make people pay to get bandages, right? We don't see how this is something that is implementable and something that is even possible from their side of the house, right? We think that this is still a major barrier to access, which I'm going to address in my argumentation, right? But then also, he tells us that people deserve choice, particularly because of the lottery of birth and how you do not get a choice to be born, right? Panel, we think for these people that are in these conditions, something you ought to understand in characterizations, that in the vast majority of instances, these are people that genuinely want to rest in peace. The reason why they continue to make the decision to be alive is particularly because of family pressure. How exactly are you expected to choose to die when your daughter comes to the hospital every day wanting to see you, right? We don't think that this is their choice. This is a lie that we get from Tino. We think the thing that these people crave the most is in fact to rest in peace because of the pain that they're going through and the whole situation they're in, right? We don't consider that a good life, and we don't think that intuitively anyone sits down and wants to be bedridden every day. We think that this is just family pressure. We don't think that anyone particularly chooses to be alive when they're in such a situation, right? Moving on to argumentation. Panel, we think that something that is very important to consider with this whole debate is the idea of quality of life, right? And what life essentially is about. We don't think life counts if it's a life that you do not get to experience what is part and parcel of a normal day in a normal life. We don't think that being bedridden and unconscious the whole day, we don't think that being injected meds to stay alive, depending on a machine to breathe, and looking beautiful because of injections and medicine is something that consists of what life is, right? We think that's something that we value so much about experiences in life is just the ability to walk here today and to be able to speak to all of you. We don't think that we consider that a life if you're going to spend your day on your deathbed, continuously fighting for your life and depending on a machine and electricity to keep you alive. We don't think that this is something you can particularly consider as life, right? The impact of this thing is that eventually you won't want to be alive. Even if Tino comes to tell us that these people want to be alive, it's sort of autonomy that he brings us, right? We think that eventually you get depressed. Because imagine being bedridden every day and your daughter coming to the hospital every day with hope, thinking that tomorrow you'll be fine, right? When that chance is probably not there, we think eventually you get depressed and you don't even want to be alive at the end of the day. And we think that this is something that is very important to consider. But then secondly, we think you also stay alive for the sake of relatives and you continuously go through prolonged pain, which is something that we think is generally not fair, particularly because it's something that you don't want inherently, right? And we think that something Wadiwa tries to tell you is how it destroys the structure of our society. How exactly do you expect to see someone every day when you know very well that they're probably going to die, right? We don't think that this is something we want. But then something that is very also important to consider is that the machine that keeps people alive in hospitals costs 25,000 per day, right? We think that this only benefits the corrupt and the elite people that can afford that, and poor people like me cannot keep my mother alive, and other people can do that. We think that this is just not justified, and this is something that is not fair, right? It is unethically justified to give them that benefit, whilst poor people also want to see their family members actively be alive. and I can't just because I can't afford that. We think that we ought to remove this from society because a particular group of people only benefit from that. So in conclusion, panel, the only reason why I love Mumbai and Wadiwa so much is not only because we're going to win this tournament, but it is also because they're going to die someday. Proud.
3, 2, 1. Panel, when my grandmother died, I didn't care about how meaningful her continued existence was. I didn't care about how she was asymmetrically left out of the medical system. What I cared about at my core was hearing her stories one more time, was the ability for her to tell me goodnight one last time, was to hold her hand and feel warm one more time. We think on their side of the house, they will always rob me of that opportunity. We are very, very proud to oppose. A few key things. Firstly, this debate wasn't just about regretting immortality. They had to defend medicalization. This has a few outcomes of it. Firstly, their argument on you being forced to be alive can't exist in this debate, simply by virtue of the fact that that's not how medical systems exist. They always ask for consent before they do anything for you. If you want to die, you get the opportunity to, on both sides of the house, you tell them you don't want to be resuscitated. I think that argument just didn't make sense. But secondly, they had to explain why medical systems fulfilling their fundamental purpose is unimportant and irrelevant to the debate. Insofar as you've done that, that is an independent path to victory. A few responses to the weird extension Muno gave us, and then finally I'm going to tell you how I'm probably winning the debate. Firstly, she tells you about barriers of access. A few key responses to this. Number one, we think the prerequisite to individuals actively get to things getting cheaper in society is people investing into it anyway, right? In most instances, penicillin started as something that was expensive. Insofar as we continually invest in it, these are things that probably get cheaper over time. Secondly, her chat about resting in peace when you want to. Again, firstly, they don't ultimately force you to do that. Secondly, we don't understand why the moment of dying in and of itself is painful. It is peaceful. We think in most instances people die painfully anyway. But thirdly, we just think not everyone wants to, right? Before I continue with my explanation, I'll make it well.
If healthcare becomes so accessible, why do we still have issues of like people in poor places still lacking access to basic education?
Because we tell you at a point in time when nations are out of this process, you get the grant being taken by private corporations. This is how ultimately, in most instances, these things get expensive anyway. My second argument in the extension of this debate then is why we think at a point in time, why the eradication of mortality is something that happens on our side of the house. We think that at a point in time where death is seen as a disease, individuals want to meaningfully avoid it, and a few key things happen. Firstly, we think that all things that could possibly at any point in your life lead to your death become an instant and direct threat to individuals. We say on your side of the house, insofar as I will die before I see the effects of climate change, I'm just unlikely to care about these things because they aren't proximal to me anyway. At a point in time where you live forever, these are things that become very relevant to you as an individual. We think comparatively individuals have greater incentive to take care of things that don't even affect them. But secondly, we think on our side of the house, we have the ability to tap into indefinite research. We say insofar as the people who have these great advancements don't die, they can continue to do things like research the problems that cause most issues within society. But thirdly, insofar as people live forever, we have the incentive to do things like make life comfortable. It's why things like ARVs ultimately exist, because in most instances, when you want to extend the life of an individual, you also want to make it as comfortable as possible. You give them painkillers, you give them ARVs, etc., etc. What then becomes the impact of this argument? Number one, we think that the help individuals actively gain from removing threats to mortality is just something that extends past the individuals who even take this medicine, which actively deals with a lot of their systemic issues. Insofar as the people who have this medicine don't want things like climate change that could possibly harm the lives of individuals in existence, they work harder to eradicate these things. We think this has a trickle-down effect even to individuals who don't take this medicalization and don't actively benefit from it. So secondly, we think that ultimately in most instances, people just get more meaningful lives. At a point in time where you have systems that keep you comfortable and do other things within your life, we think ultimately more individuals have meaningful lives. But finally, on our side of the house, and only on our side of the house, can what makes life meaningful change? What did they ultimately tell you in this debate? They tell you that the meaning of life can only ever be defined from how finite it is. Tino has already rebutted that, but I would like to just extend on that rebuttal in a few key instances. We say firstly, on their side of the house, death is something that permanently robs you of experience. It means if you find meaning in debate, for example, and you die before you have the opportunity to find meaning in something else, then you lose out on that opportunity to make your life meaningful in other sections. On our side of the house, we prove that we meaningfully extend these lives, which means individuals can experience other things that are going to make them happy in a world at a point in time or on their side of the house, those things just wouldn't exist in their life. Maybe in this life I'm a debater, but in the next one, if I got to like actively extend it, I would play rugby or something like that. We think the opportunity to actively pursue these things is something that in and of itself is valuable. At the end of the debate, we proved a few key things. Firstly, that the idea of extension of life was always what medical systems were about anyway. On their side of the house, they have to disprove why they ought to prove, like why they ought to do their intended function. On our side of the house, not only do we maximize meaning, but secondly, in most instances, we actively maximize like far-reaching societal benefits, things like climate change, etc., etc. Insofar as we do that, we are very, very glad to win the debate.
Empathy is great. It makes sure we try to avoid hurting each other more. It keeps society sane and functional. We think Opp merely wants to make human beings far more barbaric, proud. What do we get within my speech? We think two clashes. We think the first being on the value of life and the second clash being on affordability. Then thirdly, we're going to get weighing as to why we win this debate. We think then on the value of life. What's something that they tell us? We think firstly, they tell you that choice is important, particularly because of things like the lottery of birth. Therefore, individuals deserve these choices. Right? But two, they then tell you an idea of consent that I'll explain later on. What are a couple of responses to this? We think firstly, something that Muno already shows you is that you already hate living, particularly because you're suffering, particularly because you're in so much pain in your old age and you don't want to keep living at a point in time where you have this level of suffering. But then they tell you the entire idea of consent, that you are not forced into these particular things, but you choose them. But something that Muno uniquely shows you is the reason you stay alive is because of family pressures, because you don't have the guts to tell your daughter that you want to die when you're in pain, even when cancer is eating your body. We think it's because of these particular things that stop you from then being able to fight this type of family pressure. But two, we don't think life is even meaningful to these individuals. At a point in time when you're most likely going to be bedridden, we think life is the particular things where you get to like go out and have fun, but we think this is limited. At a point in time when this is limited solely to you being on your bed. We think therefore then you don't get a choice at all. We don't think they cater for their own principle. But we think you have like far better choice like on our side of the house. At a point in time when we show you that at least you get to like choose when you get to you get to like choose certain things within your life anyways, particularly because you have like incentives within that particular life. What's our push then? We think we show you that the reason why you value life is particularly because it's finite. We think life is important to you, particularly because you're worried about the people around you, because you're worried that the judgment that you get and the criticisms from the people around you. We think that's the reason why you're a better person, and you try to be a better person for the people around you because you're so scared to die. What are a couple of responses they give you to this? We think firstly, they tell you that people are just good because they love individuals and because they are human and that type of thing. But secondly, they also tell you that you're going to be a good person, particularly because the decisions you've made are going to affect you because you're not going to die, which means that like these particular things are also going to affect you, therefore you have to act in a certain way. What are a couple of responses to this? We think firstly, it's not true that human beings just love. We think the reason why you're kind to strangers is particularly because you're worried about the rest of society judging you because you die. We don't think it's true that we just love the people around us. We think we pretend to care about the people around us, particularly because we're so scared to be judged by everyone else around us, and that makes us good actors. We don't think it's something that is true, that we're just inherently loving anyways. But we think secondly, no, we don't think that you're going to be alive more is going to make you more empathetic, particularly because you're worried about these particular things also harming you. We think it means you're going to be extremely selfish, particularly because you know you're going to die and you're never actually going to cater for the people around you. We don't think it's true that the decisions you're going to make are going to affect you at a point in time you're an elitist. That's something that Muno tries to show you, right? But we think then, in terms of weighing, what's something important that we tell you? We think we affect on a greater scale, particularly because we show you that at a point in time when they make a barbaric society, this is something that's going to be far more harmful for the vulnerable within themselves. We think we affect like far more people who actually need to be protected within these type of structures and within this world. We think at a point in time where life is so finite, we make sure that certain individuals who are going to be so cruel and so evil to you limit their cruelty, particularly because they're so scared of the judgment that comes at a point in time when they live and they have to like be judged before they die. We think at a point in time when you think you're just going to live infinitely, we don't think you get this type of fear. We think therefore it means you harm more people. We think on our side of the house, we actually cater for society to make sure that society is sane and doesn't just live on the barbaric means to hurt each other. We think even if we lose on anything else, at a point in time when we show you that we make a far less barbaric society that's less evil towards each other, we think we automatically then win this debate. We don't think they can win on any other metric then. But fine, onto the second clash on affordability. We think they tell you that medicalization is just generally going to be improved, particularly because that's the point of medicine, to prevent death. What are a couple of responses to this? We think even in status quo, at a point in time where medicine was made to prevent death anyway, we think medicine has still been failing in some ways. So we don't think it's true that this particular thing is what's going to be so pivotal in medicine anyways. What was our push then? We think our push was that this, in terms of affordability, this is just going to be very low for the average person. That this is going to be something that's like exclusive to the elitists, and that means the poor are forced to watch elitists live better lives, get to see their relatives more often, or they never get to do it, and they feel like they never get their choice anyways, particularly because it's limited to the rich. What are a couple of responses they give you to this? We think firstly they tell you that it's just going to be far more affordable, particularly because corporations want to improve this for like benefits. Why do we still win this clash though? We think a couple of responses. We don't think it's true that things become cheaper under corporations. Why? Particularly because they still have like these capitalist incentives and they can overprice things for the rich anyways. So we don't think it's true that these particular things are going to be better off under corporations, if not the government anyways. But fine, why do we win this clash? On probability. We think we just show you that it's far less likely that affordability comes on their side of the house or medicine is structured in this particular way. But we think it's true. On our side of the house then, we think even if we lose on affordability in general, we think just the concept of having like a society being barbaric is dangerous within itself.
I count myself in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, panel, what we get is side proposition that is very inconsistent. At the beginning of their first speech, they tell you how people value life, they value the memories they make. Their second comes and tells you that this same people now want to die, which clearly shows inconsistency. Because they tell you now that this same grandmother wants to die and we are forcing them into the life that their firstly saved is so valuable and they want to save it, they want to make memorable, which clearly shows inconsistency, and side proposition should honestly do better. Now, what are you going to be getting in my speech? Firstly, you're going to be getting rebuttal. Secondly, weighing of the debate on which side opposition clearly wins this debate. Third, why we win this debate, and strategic flaws from side proposition. Now, first, rebuttals accessibility. They bring and tell you how Tino Tumbarara is only able to be able to save like their mother. But we clearly tell you that that is not even the chart in the debate, because we already tell you how on our side accessibility is there, because when penicillin was introduced, it was inaccessible to kings. But right now, even I can walk into a hospital and gain access to penicillin. We also clearly tell you how government already subsidizes this, so everyone is going to gain access to this, because we tell you that government are part of the highest people that invest into this because they care for the health of the people, and hence there's going to be subsidies, and everyone is going to have access to this. Now, another response to that is that the moment someone has got access to something that is able to save life, they cannot patent this, they cannot keep this as a secret, they do not have any patent right to keep this, so everyone has got an access to this, and everyone is going to be able to access this. Now, they also tell you about how life is going to be less enjoyment, right? They tell you how we only value life because we know it's going to end. But I clearly tell you right now, someone even with HIV is able to enjoy life because they have ARVs, they have got a life that is prolonged. But I clearly tell you how in the 2008, when people were dying in 2002, a family was dying in a framework of like a week. They clearly tell you how people in that era were able to only enjoy life because they knew they were going to die the next Friday. But on our side, people are not able to enjoy life because they know they can run up to 70 years, which is something that is strictly impractical within this debate. Now, I also tell you how these people don't want to go through this. That is something that has already been catered for books. We tell you that people can opt into DNR when there is no do not resuscitate. This is something that people are not going to be forced. But on their mechanism in which they already say people value life, they value the memories, that is already enough incentive for them to opt into this. Now, what's getting into my weighing of the debate? First, there is the issue of value of life and its quality. What do we get from side props? Side props reduces the value of life, and they try to tell you that we only value life because it's a small chance. We clearly believe that is something that is not true. We do not think it's practical to say a 10-year-old is going to enjoy more life than a 70-year-old, because the 10-year-old was only able to live for 10 years, but a 70-year-old lived for more. Now, what do we also say? We tell you how medicine is about saving life. What is at the core of waking up doctors at night at 3 a.m.? It is to save life. It is to prolong life. Now, as strategic flow, they try to tell you how immortality is about living life, and they said like that they try to picture to you. But on our side, we tell you how there's improved quality of life. Someone who has got cancer is able to have a life that is not as painful because there's chemotherapy. My grandmother right now was supposed to die in 2020, but because of medicalization of immortality, right now she's able to sit there and watch me debate, and she's able to make those more memories with me. I'm able to cherish them more, and that does not mean my grandmother is not able to enjoy life just because there is an extension of it. If life is so valuable on their case, it is more valuable in our case because we're able to extend something. If you love something so much, you want it more and you want it to be prolonged. But in their case, they only tell you that you like something when you're able to enjoy it for a short period of time. Now, the other aim was about accessibility. They try to lie to you and tell you that everything is so expensive and you're not going to be able to have access to this. This is something we already tell you, that the moment I figure out a drug that is able to save life, I cannot have patent rights to it. I have to disclose this and everyone has to have access to it. So there's going to be accessibility from our side. That is not a chat, that is not a pragmatic, but that is an advantage that is only available on our side of the delegation. They also try to tell you about how it is only going to be available for the elites. But like we already told you, over time drugs become very accessible because more and more people invest into this. Now, why do we deserve to win this debate, specifically as side opposition? Number one, we bring you practical benefits. To say there's going to be improvement of the quality of the life that to enjoy for a short period of time. Now, the other aim was about accessibility. They try to lie to you and tell you that everything is so expensive and you're not going to be able to have access to this. This is something we already tell you, that the moment I figure out a drug that is able to save life, I cannot have patent rights to it. I have to disclose this and everyone has to have access to it. So there's going to be accessibility from our side. That is not a chat, that is not a pragmatic, but that is an advantage that is only available on our side of the delegation. They also try to tell you about how it is only going to be available for the elites. But like we already told you, over time drugs become very accessible because more and more people invest into this. Now, why do we deserve to win this debate, specifically as side opposition? Number one, we bring you practical benefits. To say there's going to be improvement of the quality of the life that people are going to be living. We tell you how right now on their side we wouldn't have penicillin because people would just believe that you just die at any point. But right now on our side we have ARVs and people are able to live a longer life on the case that we have actually medicalized mortality. Now, why do we win this debate? We win this debate on pragmatic, we win this debate on advantages. We already tell you how this is going to ensure that medicine is going to be able to stand for what it is. On their side, what they're creating is no longer medicine. They have to give it another name because they're no longer preserving life. They're no longer standing for the annulment of life, and they're no longer standing for people's life to be saved. Now, what does side proposition bring to the table? They bring inconsistency. They first tell you that people value life so much, then they come and tell you that the moment now I have more life, more enjoyment of what I love so much, I fail to enjoy it. The moment that you're able to listen to your favorite music for long, that does not mean it fails to be your favorite song. That just means you've got no time of listening to it. So the dialogue that they have been voting for within this debate, you have more of it on our side of the debate. Thank you.